Hello, this is Chris of Magoosh, and today I have for you verbal traps. Watch out for them. Well, interestingly enough, we're oftentimes not paying as much attention to them as we should be. We're focusing on the question prompt. But what I'm going to do today is have us focus on these traps, and we're going to understand better how the test makers create these traps and why they're just so trappy. So let's dive in. Okay, notice this question. I don't want to read this question. We can read it in a second. I instead want to focus on the answer choice traps. Now, what we're going to be doing, because it is sentence equivalence, we know that the correct answer has to be, or I should say correct answers, because there's two, they have to be very similar words. And so let's look through this batch. We have identified, snubbed, hailed, unseated, lauded, and rejected. Now, at home, or pausing your video, see if you can figure out which words are pairs. I'm going to give you a second, and I assume you've done that. Okay, so snubbed. What does it mean to snub someone? I'm not going to pay you any attention. You're not worthy of it. Okay, ouch. That's a snub. Doesn't relate to identified. Hailed. Maybe you don't know what hailed is. You're thinking, hey, cab over here. So let's just leave that word for a moment. Then we have unseated. Someone is in a position of power. They've been unseated. Kind of similar to snubbed, maybe not as much, not sure. Put a question mark there, totally fine. Then we go to lauded. Lauded is a pretty high frequency GRE word, so if you don't know it, I'll tell you it. It is to praise highly, but definitely put that one in the memory banks. I'll assume you know that one. So now you have a word that it means to praise highly. You have a word like snubbed, which is the opposite. And then you have this identified word, which is neutral. So going all sorts of directions. What else do we have here? We have rejected. Snubbed and rejected are synonym pairs, very similar. Then we have lauded, which means praise, and then this mystery word, which is hailed. Could hailed mean lauded? Could it mean praise? You're not sure. But when you read the question and then you go to the answer choices, you're very likely to stay away from hailed if you don't know what it means. Now, this is a classic GRE trick. Let's test the second or even third definition of a word. Let's put it there, assuming people don't know it. And they'll pick something else that they are comfortable or familiar with. In this case, snubbed and rejected. But we know that going in now, and we can actually read the question. So let's take a look at the question. Montreux, initially blanked as the forerunner to the evolving 20th century cinematic idiom, experienced a decline. Oh no, that was as precipitous as his rise was meteoric. You can avoid all those fancy words. We just know he experienced a decline. But what we have here is a contrast going on. Initially, he has one thing, and then he experienced a decline. So we know it is something positive. We need a positive word. Now that we've controlled it right away, and by control it, I mean we've controlled the thought processes and come up with our own words, and we're not necessarily letting the answers color our perception, but we do know that snubbed and rejected are two words that are negative. And we know he was initially some positive word, like praised or lauded, because of course, afterwards, the contrast is he had his decline. So we can get rid of snubbed and rejected. We know it's a positive word. We know our GRE vocabulary is lauded. And at this point, we can choose one of those answer choices in lauded. And the other answer choice, now here's the trick. Don't think, oh, well, identified. Because if you plug identified into the sentence equivalence, that works, right? He was initially identified as the forerunner. He was something good. And then he had this decline. And then you choose it. What happened there? You picked a word that initially you didn't even pair together with another word, which is you didn't pair identified with lauded. And all of a sudden you are, because you're scared what? To pick that word hailed, which you're not quite sure what it means. But by thinking of those answer choices before reading the question, you're kind of on guard against that. There's no way this identified could be the same as praise. So you can get rid of that. And it has to be the word hailed. Hailed has to be the word that matches up with lauded. And an interesting thing, now there's one little wrinkle here. You might say, well, how do we know identified isn't the same as hailed? And I'm very happy you asked that. Identified is a very simple word that we all know, and it kind of works nicely in the blank. And the GRE knows that too. And the trap writers are thinking, what's that perfect word? Everyone knows it. It goes in the blank, but it's different enough from the matching word for what we're going for here. And of course, the other word is lauded, which is a wonderful GRE word that they love. And so you can almost bet on it that the answer is going to be lauded, and that hailed is a synonym for lauded, not for identified, and therefore, by thinking through the answer choices, understanding how they make their traps, we are able to get the correct answer. Cool, I really hope you enjoyed that video learning about the verbal traps and of course picking up on some vocab in the process. Speaking of which, learning vocab is not easy, and that's why we put vocabulary memorization tricks in the description below. Simply just click on the link to access those. Of course, if you want to watch more videos like this one, then check out the ones on your left.